Hello and welcome to today's free webinar on homeopathy. My name is Martin Stone from Switch On Health, and today we will have our experienced homeopath and nutritionist Sally Maisie presenting for us. Before we get started on tonight's session, if you would like to help support us in our mission to make natural health available to everyone, please help us by subscribing to our YouTube channel. The more subscribers we have, the more we can offer, and we look forward to offering a lot more in the future. Now, tonight, we are 1 week away from Christmas 2019. It is hard to believe, but we are approaching the silly season rapidly. So to help us survive the silly season, our presenter Sally Maisie is going to talk to us about 3 simple homeopathic remedies that might come in very useful over Christmas. So Sally, take it away.
Thanks, Martin. Hey, everyone. Just thought I'd give you a little heads up as to how difficult, obviously, we all know the Christmas season can be. So therefore, what I'm going to do is give you 3 remedies that's going to assist you through that. But before that, you have to persevere, because I'm about to sing you a little Christmas song, because it's Christmas spirit time. But it's a little different to any Christmas song you'd have, because it's got different wording. So let's see how we go here. All right. So, on the 12th day of Christmas, the season gave to me my heart a-drumming, problems with my piping, cholesterol a-leaping, visions are dancing, bright eyes a-milking, poor head a-swimming. In bed I am laying with fear of poverty, 4 squalling kids, 3 in-laws, 2 hangovers, and anticipatory anxiety. There you go. There's my little sort of 12 trials of Christmas, we might say. So those remedies that I'm going to do today are going to help reflect some of those trials of the 12 days of Christmas. So in addition to that, we have from a lovely Roman, if you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it. It's what you give to it. And this you have the power to evoke at any moment. So you can change your own doing, which is fairly obvious. We should all know that by now. So the Christmas remedies. It is the season to be silly, anxious and stressed. We have lots of hopes around Christmas and expectations. And unfortunately, they can lead to a bit of disappointment and sometimes the quarrel or two. And a lot of our anxiety over the Christmas period has a tendency to be somewhat anxiety driven, because we believe that we have to perform for others sometimes, especially if that performing is that we are the ones doing all the work. So that's what can sometimes happen to some of us. And do we measure up to our own or those standards? So I'm going to do 3 remedies. One is for nux vomica, because when we get a little bit stressed, we have a tendency to overindulge. What do we turn to? We turn to alcohol and potentially food. And then arginit, we get a little bit anxious. So then there's, one of the minerals. And then we have a tendency to be somewhat sleepless. Oh, I said this about such and such, or what happens if this happens to such and such? So let's look at coffea. So starting with nux vomica, you can see there that it's a berry, but we use the nut or the seed from it, and it can be pulverized into a powder. So the symptoms for a hangover and indulgence, I really don't have to go into it. I'm sure we've all had a hangover or indulgence, but, headaches, nausea, we've all had it. Mental, sort of worries about, well, what did I do? Did I flash my boobs? Did I do any of those sorts of things? Was I shameful? Did I embarrass myself? How many times have I heard the words, oh, never again, I'm never going to drink again? Yeah. So we've all been there potentially and done that, or most of us anyway. I don't know too many that haven't. So the remedy that helps with this, it's known as the modern man's remedy. It's nux vomica. It's for the modern man. And it's for those that may tend to have fairly sedentary lives, do a lot of work with their heads, tend to get a little bit stressed. They might sort of, go to alcohol at night to just sort of wind themselves down. They might want to have lots of sex. They might want to have sedatives of night to maybe help them sleep. And then in the morning, they might have to sort of wake up to have, you know, a coffee. You know, it's also known as go to bed with alcohol and wake with coffee. But it's also known as the Bloody Mary in homeopathy. So it's, you know, our version as to how to fix that hangover. You can see there it's known as poison nut. It's from the Loganaceae family. For first aid sort of experience, obviously rest, take some time, you know, ground yourself, go and sit by a tree, that sort of thing. Drink lots of electrolytes. Dandelion tree is very good for the liver, so that's always a good one to do. Now, if you're feeling dehydrated with that hangover, you might want to look at China as well as the homeopathic. But with the Nux vomica, you just need one dose, and it's like 30C or 200C, either first thing before you go to bed, if you can remember. It depends on how ill-advised you might be. You might just pass out, I don't know. Or have it first thing in the morning. Now, with the Nux vomica, one of the things that can happen, though, is you might actually not only feel nauseous, but it might make you purge. So it might make you vomit. So, you know, I'm not saying that it won't, but I'm not saying that it will either. Pulsatilla is another one that you could look at as well for creamy foods that are very rich during this time. So strange, rare and peculiar, feels as though your head is larger than your body. So you've got this boom, 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 big head, you know, it's like, oh, my head is just too big. It feels swollen. It feels yuck. And you might be a bit grumpy. I know quite a few people who have hangovers and they have tendency to be a little bit grumpy. Don't speak to me, can't listen, can't hear, can't bear noises, smells, light, as you can see. Some of the generals, they're fairly chilly remedies. So they might be a hangover that sort of goes, oh, it's a bit cold in here. They might, you know, they might be affected by even though it's hot outside and the aircon's in, they might sort of say, can you turn the aircon down? And they have this tendency to want to desire, because that's the symbol for desires coffee and fatty foods. So they might head straight for the sort of, you know, bacon and egg roll and the cup of coffee to go with that hangover. Physicals, you know, very typical sort of, you know, hangover-y type thing. Cramping, spasmodic, gastric pain, headaches with a little bit of head spins, you know, and obviously that's due to that alcohol consumption. There's that tendency to be worse between 3 and 5. Yeah, I couldn't think of anything worse when you wake up at 3 o'clock. Interesting, though, that that's around about the sort of liver time in the Chinese medicine as well. So, you know, the liver's sort of going, I don't like you anymore, so I'm going to wake you up and make you feel even more lousy. And you're going to feel even more lousy when you wake up. And you are obviously better for rest and dry, cold weather. So you don't like it too hot either. And it's interesting that they're fairly chilly, but even in the hot weather, they might feel as though they might be the type of person that wants to put on a jumper when it's hot. So that could be the Nux vomica sort of personality as well. So that was Nux vomica, quite quick, but the best hangover remedy that I know of anyway, apart from a Bloody Mary, really. The next one, this is Argnit. So this one's for anxiety. So it's this feeling of feeling worried that something's going to happen. You know, they're quite nervous people. They're quite anxious people generally, but they feel as though they're going to get put under pressure. They feel it, and that pressure is pressure that they're potentially putting on themselves. There might be a little bit of OCD. There can be a little bit of OCD for this particular remedy as well, from a constitutional perspective, not just first aid. They're fairly tense and on edge. You know, they're thinking, as I said, they're thinking that something may go wrong. They may experience a little bit of nausea and heart palpitations, diaphoresis, so a bit of sweating, some vertigo, some trembling. You know, they might be, you know, the type of person that when they're anxious, they get quite shaky and quite nervous, hand trembling. And it works on the adrenal glands, so it works on that sympathetic nervous system. And it's that sort of, you know, the 3 Fs of, you know, fight, fight and flight and freeze. They might be the type of person that wants to have a fight over Christmas because their adrenaline is rushing. They might be the type of person that wants to just, I don't want to spend Christmas with my family, I'm running away. Or they might just be the person that just freezes and doesn't do anything at all, and they're the type of person that don't want to talk. So Arginit's a really good one for this one. It is a neurological remedy. It's when there's that loss of control of, all three. So it's a very holistic remedy, as you can see, mental, emotional and physical, when you sort of have that sense of losing control. It's known as silver, or silver nitrate in this case. I've put a little link there for breathing exercises. Breathing exercises are good for anybody. God, you can get all sorts of breathing exercises these days. There's a really good app also that's called Breathe, which you can download onto your phone, and it's got some lovely little exercises to it. Again, ground yourself. It's the same as Nux Vom. Go and sit on a piece of dirt. Go and put your bottom on some grass. Just chill out a little. Have a good laugh. Not at somebody else's expense, obviously, but have a good giggle. Herbal teas, so your chamomilla and your sort of more relaxing herbal teas could be good. And there's a celluloid called PPMP, and I'll go into celluloid way down on the track, but they're sort of similar to the tissue salts, but in this case they're done by Blackmore's. In this case though, it's because even though it is anxiety, I've gone with a much lower dose, because especially if you're experiencing those physical sort of nauseousness, when they're anxious they get nauseous, or with heart palpitations, or you're just feeling on edge sort of thing. It's more of a physical thing you might be experiencing, so go with the 6C. If it's some physical as well as mental and emotional, then go with the 30C, so just a single dose, and see what happens. Obviously with any of these sort of first aid remedies, the more you dose, the more often you dose when it's first aid and acute, the better it can be. But you can put yourself into approving, or you can put yourself into a healing crisis if you take too much. So, just start with 6C, see how you go. If in half an hour you're still feeling a bit on edge, then, have another dose, all right? So, strange, rare and peculiar. It feels as though the buildings, and this can be buildings like just houses, not necessarily skyscrapers, but the buildings on both sides of the street are sort of moving in towards them, as though they're about to get squished. I think that's an absolutely fabulous example of a strange, rare and peculiar. They're very rushed, it's like, oh, I'm going to run out of time. Oh, I've got to do all my Christmas shopping. Where's the day gone? It's just not going to work. And then they can start to get a little bit snippy because they're really hurried. Everything's got to be really urgent. And with that urgency, they can then become a little bit impulsive. So they can then do something really silly. So they might end up, tripping over or having a little accident, or, they might sort of do something impulsive like, oh, I've just booked a trip to Paris and I won't be there for Christmas Day, see you later, But it's interesting to say that they're not going to book that trip to Paris because they also have this avid fear of flying. So they're also not necessarily going to climb the Sydney Harbour Bridge as well, because they have this avid fear of heights. Even the sight of skyscrapers, if they were to go to one of the big cities, could make them a little bit sort of anxious as well. They don't like heat at all. They don't like heat, whether it be humid or dry heat. So this weather that we're having across Australia at the moment is very not pleasant for the Arginit person. But with that intolerance of heat, they can also be quite chilly when they're not covered up. So there's the two aspects to this particular one. It's like a bit of a seesaw for Arginit, that they want to be uncovered. They feel as though they're, going to be smothered if they're, especially, if it was a child that could be a little bit anxious, or somebody who's bringing somebody new to the party and they don't know how the family's going to cope with them. They've got to meet the in-laws for the first time. Why bring them at Christmas? Who knows? But anyway, yet they feel quite smothered if they're wrapped too tight. So, and this can apply for children as well. Physicals, quite a bit of diarrhea, especially when they eat sweet foods. Again, that's a good one for the little people. And from mental exertion, they might get a little bit of diarrhea. They get this sort of, migraine of the stomach, potentially. Tossing and turning during their sleep, especially with that sort of anxious trembling. They feel as though their whole body's shaking, a bit as though, there might be a little earthquake coming, but it's them physically shaking. They're worse for the closer the date becomes. So they're worse, and remember, it's not just potentially for Christmas. This could be the day of moving a house, or it could be their wedding day. It could be an exam potentially, that's going to be, or it could even be something simple like a job interview. I did it for Christmas in particular, but you can think of it for many other different events that could be approaching. Again, worse for sweets. It's a big one. But the classic thing is for these guys is that they do crave sugar, though. They have this great desire for sugar. So if you see people starting to sort of, I need my snakes before something, or I'm having lollies, think, these Sally told me about these people. These are the arginine people, They're better for cool air. I'm just going to step outside. I need some fresh air. And if they're feeling as though there's something going on, you might sort of see them holding their heads, or, they might sort of be holding their jaw, or sort of, because they're sort of all out of sorts. All right. So that's your arginine. And then our final remedy for today. Now, this one's a great one. I love this one. Coffee, obviously, is the big one for sleeplessness. But this is your children's one. I put this one in particularly for children, because this is the inability to sleep. This is difficulty initiating, staying asleep, and they wake unrefreshed. And they may be having a little bit of bad dreams as well. Now, this one's for the little people. I say this in a minute because you'll know why. But this one's a great one for the little people. I know it's coffee, but it is coffea, which is one of our insomnia remedies. And for those that are really hypersensitive, the real hypersensitive person, their ears, their eyes, their sense of touch, their taste buds, their sense of smell, even, how they feel, might be hypersensitive. So everything's sort of, it's too noisy, or it's too bright, or, that tastes awful, or, I can't touch that because it feels rough, or it's too soft, or, that smells awful, even though it might be something lovely. And they're very hyperactive. So it's, it sounds like these little people, and you'll see why in a moment. It's from unroasted coffee, and it's cruder. There is another one for roasted coffee, which is Arabica, which is coffee. I can't remember now. I'm just having a mental break. I'll get back to you on that one. It's not coffee. Cruder is the unroasted. Sorry, lost it. Anyway, I'll find that one out, and Martin can post it for you. First aid, napping during the day is really good. Chamomile tea with a little bit of honey. Practicing sleep hygiene, so, not too hot a room, not doing electrics before bed, certainly not having too many stimulants, all that sort of thing. In this case, now I have done this as a very low potency, a 6C and a 12C, because I've done this specifically for children. And again, you'll find out in a minute why. If there is sleeplessness with exhaustion, though, and they need to have a bit of a second wind, say they've been partying a lot, not necessarily children in this regard, this is for the adults, they've been partying a lot and they're exhausted, and they need to sort of have a second wind, then that is more likely to be arnica, though, just to sort of, fill you in on that one. But strange, rare and peculiar, feels as though there's a nail that's been driven into their head. I couldn't imagine it. I've never imagined it. So, it would be quite a strange feeling, I'm sure. Quite nervous and weak from being overexcited. Now, here is the child side of things. It is this ailments from excessive joy. Now, when we talk about homeopathics, we might say never well since. So an example might be never well since puberty, or never well since this illness, or never well since menopause. But we might also say ailments from the flu, or ailments from sadness, or ailments from grief. In this case, it's ailments from excessive joy. Now, we've all been there. If you haven't, I'm sorry that you haven't, because it is a pretty full-on experience. But it's that little child on the night before Christmas that's going, oh, is Santa coming, and what presents am I going to get? And I'm so excited, and I'm so joyful, and this is such a happy moment. And oh my goodness me, I can't sleep. I just can't sleep. Mummy, Daddy, can't do it. It's not going to happen. I ain't going to sleep. You know, this is this precious little person that just goes off, absolutely goes off. Now, I'm sorry about my dog barking in the background there. And it's this anticipation of the future. What's Santa going to bring me? What am I going to get? You know, they're this little, and look, it might not be Christmas. It might be the day before their birthday, or the day before a birthday party. You know, we've all seen little people, and it is such a great thing to watch. But it can be detrimental to their health, because they then can't sleep, yeah? So they might wake up at 3 o'clock, and, you know, they're looking at their watch, and they've gotten up just to see if mum and dad are still awake, or if mum and dad are asleep, can I wake them, you know? And believe me, I was one of those little people at 3 a.m, and if I'd known that the homeopathics were around then, I probably would have gotten a lot better sleep, you know, and would have appreciated, you know, Christmas Day probably a little bit more. Because by sort of about, I can remember just after lunch at about 2 o'clock, I was sound asleep, you know. So, yeah, I think wakes at 3 o'clock and then dozes is very appropriate. And these little people, whatever you do to these little people, don't put them in tight clothes. Let them choose their clothes. Let them, you know, they might just want to have a pretty little dress that's not too tight, or the boys might want to just have a pair of shorts, not a, you know, not tight pants or whatever. So just be aware of that for the little people. But it's this great one where you see, you know, that pure joy on a little person's face when they're going, you know, he's, you know, you can give it to an adult that could be with pure joy as well, but it is what it is. Physicals, they've got this real funny, full feeling, crampy feeling in their tummy. They might have a little bit of indigestion because they're so excited that their whole body's just bubbling up, ready to go. And they just wake up from anything, you know. And think about it from this perspective as well, that even bubbers, you know, they can feel the energy in the home, what's happening in the home. So if mum and dad are excited, or mum and dad feel a bit restless and a bit sleepless or a bit anxious, then the little people are going to feel that too. So hence the reason why they might wake from that slightest noise. Now this is, I've never experienced this at all from having too much fun. I feel worse from having too much fun. But these little people have had so much fun that they might sort of burst into tears. You know, they burst into tears because they're so exhausted that they know they want to sleep, but they don't want to sleep because they don't want to miss out. Yeah. So it's just too much fun going on, you know, and everything. So there's too much noise and smells and touch and everything. But this is the remedy for them. They're better for warmth, you know, when they lie down. They're better for lying down. So it is important that these little people potentially, you know, need a nap. And they like ice. It's a great one. They like a little bit of ice in their mouth. So if they're starting to get a bit too anxious throughout the course of the day, then after the fact that they haven't slept, you know, and it could be not just Christmas Eve, it could be the day before Christmas Eve that they're getting so excited because family's starting to arrive and their cousins are there and they're playing and all sorts of things are happening, yeah? So yeah, cold drinks might sort of just calm them down a little bit, you know, just a little bit of ice water might sort of help them out. Finally, the important go-tos, which every first aid kit should have, is rescue remedy and emergency essence. Whether you want to do the bark flowers, which is rescue remedy, or the Australian bush flowers, which is that emergency essence, either one of those, you know, always have on hand that even if you don't have your homeopathics with you, you can have these in your handbag and you can give that to anybody and everybody. All right, pregnant women, babies, the whole bit. If you're worried about pregnant women and babies, you can just put it on pulse points. You know, just put it on their pulse points here and on their neck. You know, you can even just get them to smell it from an olfactory perspective. Even that can help with the homeopathics, and even maybe sometimes holding them can help as well. That's me for Christmas, guys. Next month we'll be doing back to school. So that'll be in January, because obviously we'll be getting back to school. And remember, no one is obligated to continue any holiday traditions that leave them broke and overwhelmed and exhausted. By understanding this, you also begin to practice unconditional love, because not only for yourself, but for others, because you're not led to any disappointment because you have expectations. I wish you all a very Merry Christmas, and hope that Santa comes surfing into your life, and that your new year is spectacular, and I shall see you in the new year. Martin, are you around and about?
I sure am, Sally, but I don't know how I could possibly follow up on that presentation. I think you've excelled. You've outdone yourself. That was a priceless presentation for Christmas and remedies that can help for it. I think we'll have to put this video into our Hall of Fame once we've got one.
There you go. That's it.
So we do have a few minutes left. We've got about 8 minutes left. So if anybody would like to ask any questions, feel free to type them into the little chat box. If you'd like to ask a question using a microphone, just let us know via the chat box and we can switch your microphone on for you. If you're watching this video on our YouTube channel, you are also welcome to ask us questions via YouTube, and one of us will respond to you. One of our staff will be happy to answer any questions that you might have. So in the meantime, you know, while people are thinking about what questions they might want to ask, we've just had one come through actually. So I'll save my questions because we have a question here from Robbie who wants to know, what is PPMP?
Okay, so Robbie, PPMP is one of the Blackmore's celloids group. So in homeopathics, we use the tissue salts, and that would be caliphos and magnesium phosphate. Yeah. In this case, it's potassium phosphate, because Blackmore's didn't want to use the sort of chemical name for it, potassium phosphate and magnesium phosphate. Now, you can buy them in most stores, but they are a practitioner-only product. But in our natural world, we use them for many things. Now, the first thing that we use them for is anxiety. So if you're feeling very anxious, you can get these PPMPs, you can drop them in water, you can shake your water, you can sip on it throughout the course of the day. Alternatively, what you can do is you can chew on them. You can chew on them like lollies. You know, the body is only going to urinate out what the body does not need. But it's very specific because it's in a cellular level. If you read the Blackmore's celloid story, that Morris Blackmore and Mr. Schuller, who did the tissue salts, started these minerals because they found that they were the 12 minerals that were found in cadavers after their bodies were burnt. So if they're in my ashes when I die, I think they're pretty bloody important, to be honest. If they're the things that are still found when I am no longer on this mortal coil, then I think that they're pretty important to have in our body at all times. Now with PPMP, as I said, it's for anxiousness, but it's also our painkiller. We use it as our analgesic. So my husband, who used to do Masters AFL football, would use those on a very sort of 15-minute basis before he went into a game, and certainly a 10-minute basis when he came out of a game, because they play pretty hard, those old boys. And he would chew them, as I said, like lollies, and they were very beneficial. They're very good for headaches. They're, you know, I've had many students. It's one of the first things I try to put them onto, and they end up, you know, falling in love with them because they are so effective. And I do highly recommend either the tissue salts or the Blackmore's celloids. And I will be doing the tissue salts and the celloids in one of the subjects for homeopathy.
Is it possible to overdose or, end up proving a celloid in the way that it is with a homeopathic remedy?
No, not with the celloids. The only one possibly could be calcium sulfate, because that is a homeopathic. It's not a true celloid, because Blackmore believed, or Morris believed, that the celloids really were very physical, that people were more deficient of these, obviously due to, the types of fruit and veg that they eat and everything else were depleted of many of these really good minerals. But they work, he developed them in a more physical sense rather than homeopathic sense, because he believes that we were very deficient of them. And there is a really good chart that you can see where we look this, the one thing about celloids is we learn about eye and how to see in the eyes what celloid might be necessary, or in the nails, or in the tongue as well. So we do tongue and nail and eye recognition.
Okay, another question here. Is
Yeah,
arginine good for kids too?
Yep, absolutely. Absolutely, Robbie. Yeah, arginine is fantastic for children. Any of these remedies, any homeopathics are good for kids. Absolutely. Yeah, if they're showing the signs, or if they're showing those signs and symptoms, again, you've got to remember though, don't fall into the category of becoming a generic homeopathic prescriber, that you're just seeing certain signs in every person. Remember, every little person is individual. But if you're recognizing those very specific symptoms in little people that you know, then I believe that that's probably one of the better remedies for them at the time. But yeah, just make sure that with the little people, you start off with a lower potency. So maybe a 6C or a 12C. But a 30C is okay for little people too.
Excellent. Thank you, Sally. I could definitely relate to the Nux vomica picture that you've painted. I think we probably all can, but Sally's been telling me for years that I should probably take more Nux vomica, and after her presentation tonight, I think she's probably right. Sally, coffee, you mentioned, hypersensitivity with kids. We've got 3 minutes left, by the way. Would coffee possibly be a good remedy for kids with ADHD, or if they're somewhere on the autistic spectrum?
Yeah. So it is a really good one for that. Again, don't fall too much into the category of prescribing for diseased states. I'd be more inclined to take that little person's, complete picture, and make sure that you get all their symptoms, because just because coffee is that sort of OCD type sort of aspect, or that sort of hyperactivity sort of aspect, doesn't mean that that's necessarily, because even something like pulsatilla can have that hypersensitivity as well. So just be careful that remember that it's not naturopathy here, it's homeopathy, and it is very much about that, individual picture.
Yep, good advice. Good advice. What about when kids get so excited that they vomit?
Yeah, so again, that's another one that I would be more inclined to maybe look at that. Even Nux vomica might work for that one if they're feeling nauseous with vomiting, because again, it's that overindulgence. It's an overindulgence of mental and emotional states in this premise sort of thing. So even Nux vomica might be in the picture, or even arginine. Again, don't make me a generic prescriber, because I can't.
Yeah, fair enough. Look, I love the picture you painted for arginine as well, and that anxiety. And what I really got from that is that a lot of people, especially the matriarch of the family, they've got all the family coming, all the in-laws, they've got to get their Christmas dinner ready, they've got to get the kids, somebody's coming who's got allergies, they've got to make sure that they've got food they can have, and they work themselves up into a real tiz about it. That's the picture
Yeah.
that I get for arginine.
Absolutely, yeah, and it is that real sort of, if you think of silver, it's that real, I've got to be very glossy, yeah, it's shiny, I've got to present myself as being shiny, but underneath it's pretty fragile.
Yeah, great analogy. Okay, well, we've only got a few seconds left, so I hope you've enjoyed the session as much as we have. Tune in for the next one, and we look forward to seeing you again. Learn more with Switch On Health.
Excellent. Thanks, everybody. Have a very Merry Christmas and a very safe New Year. Drive safe.